Obsidian has come a long way in terms of artistic design, from the dulled colour scheme of KOTOR 2 and New Vegas to the extravagantly expressive Pentiment and Outer Worlds, but their writing abilities haven't evolved in the same way, because you don't need to when you're already at the top. They're able to craft engaging dialogue in any tone, from the ironic hyper-capitalistic parody of Fallout and the Outer Worlds, the serious tone of the dark side of the Star Wars universe, and the historical authenticity of the 14th century. Hell, they co-wrote a South Park game. These guys know how to write. And this approach to the tone of writing is reflected in these games' respective art style. KOTOR has a muted colour palette than what Star Wars is traditionally known for, and Pentiment has a painted style to add to the authenticity of the setting. Now, you might say that New Vegas breaks away from this trend by having hysterical writing and a dreary colour palette, but the Mojave is soaked in a glowing orange, which gives the game a more cartoonish and sillier tone than the muted greens of Fallout 3. But now we've come to Avowed, Obsidian's newest and most colourful game to date, offering a rich colour palette on every frame that simply leaps out and transports you to a whimsical fantasy realm. But Avowed is anything but whimsical, presenting a land under the oppressive thumb of colonialism and people who have been taken away by a plague that threatens to devour the entire region, with said plague taking on the form of a rainbow-tinted zombie infection. My god, is this the fabled woke mind virus? So far, this is no different from Fallout. It's a deadly serious state that the world is in, but visually it's a cartoonishly over-the-top kaleidoscope of colours to downplay the severity of the situation. But instead of the ironic tongue-in-cheek writing that makes light of the situation, Avowed mostly plays it straight, with several dramatic and harrowing moments. The theme of the story is colonialism and the adverse effects it has on the population it's committed against. This is a heavy theme, and the game demonstrates it brutally in full force, featuring genocides of scholars and thinkers, as well as the destruction of indigenous ruins and identity, themes that are especially relevant in recent history with the conflict in Gaza, but of course the timing is nothing more than coincidence. This is further explored by the Dream Scourge, which can be seen as the Living Lands itself revolting against these colonists by turning the island into dream thralls. These shambling husks are highlighted in high-vis hues, which, while artistically bold, soften their appearance and perception. The Dream Scourge are worse than the Steel Garrote, at least in my opinion. While colonialism is abhorrent and a practice that never should have existed, let alone continue to exist, a zombie virus is arguably worse. It's just pure destruction and chaos, without even granting its victims the mercy of death, but instead cursing them to insanity and suffering. That's not to say that oppression is better than death, though that choice should be made by the individual rather than decided on by a collective or leader, but I think everyone can agree that they'd rather be oppressed than zombies. But I'm autistic, so I have no idea how you neurotypicals think. The point I'm trying to get at here is that Avowed, in trying to be artistically bold, reduces the impact that the Dream Scourge should have, when in actuality, they're almost identical to the clickers from The Last of Us. At least if we go with the HBO show's justification that global warming is what caused cordyceps, then we can draw a direct parallel between clickers and dream thralls as fungal infections that symbolize nature's rebellion against humanity. Now imagine if The Last of Us is infected were also technicolor and were visually striking instead of abhorrent. The difference between The Last of Us and Avowed is obviously that one's in a fantasy world and the other takes place in the modern day. So there's a justification for the Dream Thralls to boast an expressive colour scheme, as they're fueled by nature, which is inherently bright and colourful, and stands in direct contrast to the Steel Garrote's pristine and muted colour scheme. The things the two sides represent, chaos and order, aren't reflected in the Dream Thralls' colours. Sure, chaos is messy and by its own definition has no rhyme or reason to it, but it's anything but beautiful. Chaos is something that's purely destructive. Nothing can thrive or prosper when it takes over. There's no sane argument in favour of chaos, no matter what your personal views are, from the most tyrannical of dictators to the most starving of beggars. No one wants to live in a lawless world of chaos and anarchy. And that's the core moral struggle in Avowed, authoritarianism, which is evil, and chaos, which is destructive. It's a topic that Obsidian has a lot of experience in, with the choice between Mr. House and Caesar's Legion in New Vegas, or the Board and various rebel factions in the Outer Worlds. But this time, the side of chaos is different, because while the Legion and some of the rebels were founded on wildly deluded ideologies, the Dream Scourge has no ideals at all. It just wants every sentient creature out of the living lands, without even granting them the mercy of death, just eternal suffering. I feel as though the colour scheme muddles that message, and Obsidian is trying to get us to side with Sarpedel, even though they're worse than the Steel Garrote. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go wash my mouth out for praising fascism. For more Avowed essays, here's one about how Avoid's choices have a bit too much nuance.